On today's episode of Locked On Wild, it's officially Danila Yurov time.
Hey, this is Matt Boldy, and you're listening to Locked On Wild.
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team each and every day, and we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day as well. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. On today's episode of Locked On Wild, we will take a look at Danila Yurov signing his entry-level contract to head here to North America with a hope of making the Minnesota Wild roster for next season. We'll talk about an interesting clause in his contract should that not happen. And, of course, we'll look at where he could potentially fit in the lineup. We'll talk about the latest with Rossi and the Minnesota Wilds. And we're going to give you a little offer sheet 101 because there are some stipulations to offer sheets and signing players to offer sheets. So we'll give you some of the facts about the entirety of the process because that's a potential route we could see teams go with Marco Rossi this offseason. My name is Seth Toupal, host of Locked On Wild, and it finally happened today. We've been waiting for a couple of weeks for this to finally come down the pipe, but officially got the word today that Danila Yurov has signed his entry-level contract with the Minnesota Wild, 3-year deal, as they typically are, but there are a lot of interesting nuggets to break down in Yurov's contract that we certainly should discuss ahead of him coming to the NHL as soon as this upcoming season. Yurov is going to earn $950,000 per season, $855,000 in salary, plus $95,000 in an annual signing bonus when he's in the NHL, with a chance to earn max A bonuses as a forward. Michael Russo breaks this all down in his write-up on The Athletic. He can earn $250,000 for each bonus, up to a maximum of $1 million if he achieves 4 of the following each season: 20 goals, 35 assists, 60 points, top 6 in total or average ice time among Wild forwards with a minimum of 42 games played, top 3 in plus minus amongst Wild forwards, again, minimum 42 games, 0.73 points per game, minimum 42 games, making the all-rookie team, being an all-star selection, or being the all-star game MVP. He can also earn up to $1 million if he achieves any B bonus thresholds, according to league sources. Those bonus thresholds include finishing in the top 10 in the NHL in goals, assists, or points per game, minimum 42 games. If he's named a first or second team all-star or wins the Hart, Selke, or Rocket Richard, or Conn Smythe trophies. This was a compromise from both sides, as 2022 draft picks can receive up to $2.5 million in those Type B bonuses. Not likely to be achieved, but the fact that they are still in there, in addition to the Type A bonuses, I think leads you down the path that he is likely, very likely, going to be on the NHL roster come this upcoming season. Now, what happens if he isn't? What happens if for some reason he comes into training camp, just doesn't look the part, and the Wild say, we're going to send you to Iowa? Well, hold the phone, because Yurov's contract has a European out clause that allows him to be loaned back to his KHL team rather than going to Iowa. The out clause lasts the entirety of the contract, which, according to Russo, is not standard. So that is, I think, a little assurance that we're going to have you on the roster. And it's interesting, too, that Billy was very vocal about, we understand there are going to be some growing pains. We want to get him in the lineup and see what we've got, which is something that you really haven't heard that phrasing, considering what we have seen from other rookies that have been put into the lineup for the Minnesota Wild over the last couple of seasons. Now, Yurov obviously in 2023-2024 had a great season. He had 49 points in 62 games, 21 goals, 28 assists. He had 6 goals in the playoffs as Metallurg won the championship in that 2023-2024 season. This year, 46 games played, suffered an ankle injury late in the year, also had a shoulder injury in the off season. So 1-2 combo of injuries that led to only being in 46 games, 25 points in the 46 games, including 13 goals. And then in the postseason, just 5 games this past year because his team did not do as well. And he had 1 goal in the 5 games. Does not seem to be any concern about either injury. Bill Guerin saying pretty much that they expect he will be at 100% by the time training camp gets underway. So no injury concerns. And it's going to be exciting to see what Yurov brings to the table, because I think, at least from what we've seen from scouts, from draft experts, is that he has a very good mix of both offense and defense to his game. 200-foot game is, I think, the phrase that is most commonly used in these cases. In quotes from Scott Wheeler, also in the Russo piece, he plays hard and fast. He pushes the tempo. He's a strong and balanced skater. He's an excellent give-and-go player who excels at playing in and out of space without the puck. His shot comes off his blade hard in motion. He's got pro size, 6'1", 180 right now. He is diligent in all 3 zones, and he's almost always in the right position or reading the play to get back into it on offense or defense. I think the biggest surprise is that the Minnesota Wild will be starting Yurov at center for the beginning of his pro career, with the assumption then that if that doesn't work out, that you move him to a wing position. But this is, I think, a reason that the Wild have, gone down the path where it looks as though Marco Rossi is going to be moved this offseason. And it's funny because there's not a huge difference here. You're talking 5'9" to 6'1". That has been really the only thing that is a detractor for Marco Rossi, and there's nothing he has any control over, is the size that he brings to the table. I think he has played perfectly fine at 5'1", but now you bring in Danila Yurov, who's a few inches taller. He's above 6 foot. But I think the thing here that is going to be interesting to see is, do the Wild immediately put Danila Yurov with Kirill Kaprizov this upcoming season? Do you, for the sake of lineup depth, do we see Kaprizov, Yurov, Zuccarello, and Boldy, Erikssonek, and whoever you add? They're going to add somebody. Whoever you add as another top 6 piece, Liam Olgren or outside roster player, that top 6 has a quite a bit of a different look to it. I think if Yurov can come in and even just be a steady presence, we've seen so much all or nothing with this Wild roster over the last few years. Is you've got guys in that top 6 that go absolutely scorching hot for a couple of weeks and then ice cold. Like, it would be nice to have something that is a little different than all or nothing, and can be just more of a consistent presence. Do we see Kaprizov, Boldy, and Yurov? Do we see there are options for how to attack this top six? I think at minimum, I think we'll see Danila Yurov in the top six once he comes over here. So I guess I would be shocked if he doesn't make the team out of camp. Now, that's a lot of pressure to put on a player, but I feel like with what he has done in the KHL, and again, he was victim to what is pretty standard practice in the KHL. If you don't re-up with your team, then you get stuck in like a third line role and you play 4 to 5 minutes a night. He persevered right through that, and this is one that Wild fans have been excited for the last few seasons, is to see him finally get over here. And with all the stipulations in the contract, all the bonuses and all that, it does seem like he's coming in to play a significant role on this roster this upcoming season. So that's going to be fun to speculate as to where he pops into the lineup. But frankly, at this point, I'm just glad it's done. I'm just glad it's signed. And I'm just glad we don't have to continue to worry about it as Wild fans, because we have plenty to worry about at this point in the offseason, including the status of one Marco Rossi. We'll talk about the latest because it sounds as though there was a short-term counter to the longer-term deal that the Wild initially proposed. So we'll take a look at all of those details as we continue today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by Game Time. The Stanley Cup playoffs have provided high levels of drama at every level. With things heating up, there has never been a better time to see games in person. And Game Time makes getting in the building fast and affordable. Game Time gives you last-minute ticket deals, zone deals for deep discounts, panoramic seat views, and all-in pricing with no hidden fees. Plus, ticket prices often drop the closer you get to puck drop, so you can score big without overpaying. There is nothing worse than going to an arena and not being able to see the court as well as you could in other spots. No longer is this an issue. Game Time gives you a look from your seat before you even buy the tickets. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. We will be giving you a little Saturday action coming up tomorrow. We're right in the midst of both the high school and collegiate baseball playoffs, so getting a chance to do some college baseball play-by-play for you tomorrow afternoon. After that, we'll pop in a video for you later in the evening to get you through your Saturday. But obviously, with Danila Yurov coming over, Michael Russo was speculating that this maybe accelerates the timeline for Marco Rossi to be moved once we finally get to the point where teams start making moves after the Stanley Cup playoffs are over. I did find it interesting that we have now official word that there was a counter offer to what was initially offered to Rossi's side. So Rossi was initially offered a 5-year, $25 million contract extension earlier this winter. Rossi didn't like that, so they countered with a shorter term, higher AAV. I'm assuming this was a 3-year, $7 million. That'd be my guess as to what happened. But the Wild did not like that either. So you got the hey, we'll sign you long term, but we're not going to give you as much, to the, well, we'll take a shorter deal, but we want the AAV to be higher. And the reason I think that Rossi's number has been as high as it is, look at some of the recent extensions for young centers or young forwards in the league. Obviously, the big one recently is the Matt Coronado deal that was signed with the Calgary Flames, a 7-year, $45.5 million contract. And you look at Coronado's numbers this past season, after really not playing much to start his ELC, he played in one game to start off his entry-level contract in 2022-2023. Then he played in 34 the next year. He had 3 goals and 9 total points. This last year, he played in 77 games, had 24 goals and 47 total points, and then he gets $6.5 million per for the next 7 seasons. Matty Beniers, another young center that has recently signed an extension, and actually this past season was the first year of that deal, the 7-year, $50 million contract that he signed with Seattle. He had 20 goals. He played in all 82 games. He had 20 goals. He had 43 total points. Obviously, he is, he's 6'2", so he's got a little more size to him. And again, I hate like 5'9", 6'2". I'm 5'10". I can do my job just fine. Granted, I'm in radio, but hey, we can't be picky. And Beniers, over the course of his, he got a 1 year earlier start than Marco Rossi did. The year that Rossi played in 19 games, and that was pretty much it. Beniers played 80 games that year, had 57 points. Then he had a big drop-off in 2023-2024, 37 total points, 15 goals. Little bit of a step back up. Now, to be fair, it's a awful Seattle roster around him. But at the same time, I'm going to have to do a little more digging into like what Beniers specifically brings to the table. And I will, because obviously the Wild are not going to trade Rossi for nothing. Like they're going to get something of value in return. And if we know anything about Bill Guerin, a route that he typically likes to do is the hockey trade, where you bring in maybe another young player in a similar situation where it just doesn't seem like they got a good fit on the team. Doesn't mean they're not a good player, just don't really fit on the team. So there's going to be some level of return back for that. Another one, Dylan Cousins, he signed. Now he is a few years into his deal, but Cousins signed, his biggest deal was 7 years, $49.7 million. So that's a 7.1 cap hit per year. Cousins, after a 31-goal season that precipitated the extension, he dropped to 18 goals in 2023-2024, then 11 goals with the Sabres before he was traded. He played in all 82 games for both the Sabres and the Senators, and he had 16 goals, and he had 47 total points. So offense is kind of trending in a downward direction. He is, however, 6'3", 194. But here's the problem with Dylan Cousins, is now the Ottawa Senators brought him in, and I would imagine they probably have designs on keeping him long-term. So he probably is not a name that you can look at as like let's do a change of scenery trade for a guy like that. One name that has gotten a lot of discussion from the Buffalo Sabres is JJ Peterka, 6 foot, 190-pound wing. He had 27 goals this past season, 28 goals the year before that. He is just 23 years old, and he is a restricted free agent this offseason. similar situation to Marco Rossi. Now, another interesting note, and I had been unclear about this all offseason. Marco Rossi is not eligible for arbitration. So that was a route that I was hoping maybe this would all go, just to kind of see where the figures lie. Not eligible. So it's probably going to end up being, unless Billy works out a trade, it could end up going the offer sheet route. Now, offer sheets are tricky, but fear not, because there's a lot to take in for offer sheets. We're going to set you straight with offer sheet 101 as we finish today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. We are also your team each and every day as well. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. So let's talk offer sheets, because that seems to be the most consensus route that this all goes, unless Billy is able to find a trade partner before July 1st. So first off, what is an offer sheet? An offer sheet is something that a team can extend to a restricted free agent with the hopes that that player wants to sign with that particular team, and then they provide compensation to the team that controls the player's rights. So it's like free agency, but then you send compensation to the team that originally had the player. We saw this last season a couple of times. Two Edmonton Oilers players were signed to offer sheets by the St. Louis Blues. Edmonton obviously had some issues in the cap department that prevented them from being able to sign both players. Philip Broberg was one, and Dylan Holloway was the other. There was an interesting wrinkle to this, because in order to sign a player to an offer sheet, you have to have your original draft pick to send to the other team. There are tiers that, depending on the contract that you sign the player to, you have to send appropriate compensation to the other team. So let's start with Dylan Holloway, who signed for $2.29 million per season with the Blues. So based off of this year's compensation, that would require the Blues send the Oilers a third-round draft pick. Now, it's not for this draft, it's for 2026. So if that same offer sheet happened this offseason, St. Louis would have to send Edmonton a third-round pick in 2026 for that contract, because it was between, like, literally just under. And that's why it was 2.29, is because the second tier of offer sheets is between $1.544 million to $2.34 million. 2.29, just under. So it ended up being a third round pick. So the tiers are as follows. So for this offseason, $0 to $1.544 million is no compensation. You don't have to give the team from which the player came, you don't have to give them anything. So maybe you think you can kind of pull the rug under somebody's eyes by going with a player here. You can just go ahead and there's no repercussions whatsoever. $1.544 million to $2.34 million is a third round draft pick. The next tier is $2.34 million to $4.68 million. This is a second round draft pick. $4.68 million to $7.02 million is a first and a third round draft pick. $7.02 million to $9.36 million is a first, a second, and a third round draft pick. $9.36 million to $11.7 million is 2 first round picks, a second round pick, and a third round pick. And then for the absolute lunatic GMs out there, anything over $11.7 million for an offer sheet is 4 first round picks. I would be shocked if we ever see one of those types of things. You don't see offer sheets all that often because it's kind of assumed that it's like it's one of those unwritten rules like in baseball. Don't step on the foul lines. In hockey, don't sign another GM's players to an offer sheet. That created some hurt feelings between Edmonton and St. Louis, to say the least, when those offer sheets were sent out. So let's say, just for the sake of argument, let's say 2 teams send out offer sheets for Marco Rossi. There would probably be more if it does come to that. One of the teams, let's just say, is the Anaheim Ducks. And another one of the teams is the Ottawa Senators. Marco Rossi can choose which one he wants to sign. He's not like, and even if one comes in, the Wild have the opportunity to match and just sign him at that level of contract, and you avoid the whole thing. But if the Wild do not elect to match, then Rossi goes to that team. The compensation, depending on his AAV, ends up coming back the other way. So a team wants to sign Marco Rossi to an offer sheet. This is where the AAV is important. And this is why it is important to look at the players in which Marco Rossi is performing better than. Marco Rossi performed better than Matt Coronado, so he should be higher than 6.5. He performed better than Matty Beniers, who was at 7.1. He also performed better than Dylan Cousins, who's at 7.1. If a team signs Marco Rossi to a 3-year, $21 million contract, or 3-year, $22 million contract, or 23. Let's go 23. I'm not a math guy, if you can tell. 3 years, $23 million. That equates out to $7.1 million. The Wild would get a first, a second, and a third in return. So you can either look to make a hockey trade, or you can go the route of the offer sheet and get the compensation that way as well. We'll talk more about the NHL draft as we get there, but not the greatest of draft classes this year. So my preference would be to pull in talent that can help you now as opposed to draft picks. If it was last year's draft class, if we were having this discussion before last year or before this most recent season, I would sprint to Bill Guerin's office and say, if somebody signs him for 7.1 or 7.2, take the picks, take the draft picks. But you know, it's not a great draft class this year. So that is, I would say, in terms of the likeliest outcomes, trade, good old-fashioned hockey trade, bringing in something that can help this season. Offer sheets. Look, I will say this too, because we had this discussion last offseason as well. Bill Guerin has not traded Marco Rossi yet. So while this situation looks not the best, it's not irreparable. Although, counterpoint, when Bill Guerin gets to the point that he feels like a player is not going to help you on the team, he really rarely changes his mind. Kevin Fiala, think about everything that went down there and that famous quote on K-Fan of Bill Guerin saying, we're not like, we got to keep in mind that Kevin Fiala basically had 3 good months of the season and that was it. Like once he gets in his head that you're not part of the solution long term, Cam Talbot, that happened during the draft, but see how quickly that situation escalated and led to a trade. If Billy doesn't feel like you are part of the group moving forward, he'll find somebody else. So while it's not irreparable, it just feels like it's moving in that direction. So it would be interesting. It would be nice. I know Matty Nyes is out there for the Toronto Maple Leafs, but let's also keep this in mind as well. With Mitch Marner looking for $12 to $13 million a year, and beyond that, and Alex and I will talk about this on Monday, beyond the salary demands, I'm a pass on Mitch Marner. I know there's been some steam here in Minnesota that he would be a good player to go after. I'm a pass on Marner. I think there are better ways to spend money than to just, because you've got to give Kirill Kaprizov a big long-term deal, or you're going to give Marner a matching deal and basically just go Parise Suter 2.0. But we'll talk about it more on Monday. If Marner does leave Toronto, Nyes will get a hefty deal to stay, to fill that spot. That's how teams do it. You fill when free agents leave, you fill from within. So hopefully that is helpful as far as the offer sheets go. I know there's a lot of different things to them, but if a team would offer Marco Rossi 7.2 per year, that's not the worst thing. And I'm realizing now that I was poo-pooing this year's draft class and the picks are for next year. So maybe offer sheet is not the worst idea, but it doesn't really help you now. And I think Bill Guerin is probably looking more for help now as opposed to later. So all food for thought. We'll see what happens. But again, I stress Marco Rossi has not been traded yet. Just feels like that's the direction it's moving. So thank you everybody for tuning into today's episode. Once again, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe before you head out for the night. Appreciate everybody tuning in as you do each and every day throughout the week. We will have another episode coming up for you tomorrow right here on Locked On Wild. So we will catch you then. Enjoy the rest of your Friday. You have been listening to Locked On Wilds, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.